Hey guys, I'm JT Shaver with New Layer, and today we're going to be reviewing 5 different LED lights to help you choose which one's the best for you. So you can see I've only got 4 lights in front of me, and that's because I'm using the 5th one to record this video, and that's because it's my favorite all-around light, but we'll get to that one last, so stick around. The 5 lights we're going to be taking a look at today are the Neewer 660 LED bicolor panel light, the Socani X60, the Neewer SL-60W, which is essentially the same thing as the Godox version, the Yongnuo YN362 Pro LED stick light, and the Godox SL150W. I'm not going to get super technical because you can look up the specs for all of these lights online, but I am just going to give you some real life use examples and what I find to be the best and the worst thing about each light. So the first light we'll talk about is the least expensive, and that's the Neewer 660 LED bicolor panel light. The first thing I like about this light is that it's completely silent. It doesn't have any fans, and that just makes it really good for interviews or up-close video when you don't want the sound of a light getting into your microphone. I also like that it's bicolor, so you can change the color temperature from anything from 3200 Kelvin up to 5600 Kelvin. That makes it a little easier to match with any other lights in your scene or to create some cool looking effects. The last thing I like about this light that's not available in most of the other lights is that you can power it with a cord or with batteries. Now for some of the drawbacks. The first thing is that it has no Bowens mount, so you're really stuck with the built-in diffusion panel or the barn doors as your only modifiers. If you stick it on an adapter, you can also use an umbrella, so it's not that big of a deal, but if you really like having giant soft boxes, you won't really be able to do that easily with this light. Something else to consider is although this light is really bright without the diffuser on, once you stick that on, it cuts a lot of light, and then if you stick another modifier on, you lose even more light. So if you plan to use this for shooting interviews or something up close, you need to make sure you have a really fast aperture lens, like an f1.8, and even then, depending on your modifier, you might have to be shooting at ISO 400 or maybe even 800. Now these lights are so cheap that you could essentially buy 2 of these for the price of one of some of the others, but then you have to deal with trying to mount 2 of them on one light stand or use 2 light stands, and that can get kind of cumbersome. The other thing is that since it is bicolor, half of the LEDs are 3200 Kelvin and the other half are 5600 Kelvin. So to get the max brightness out of this, you have to make sure both are on, which gives you a color temperature around 4000 Kelvin. Now if you're exclusively using these lights, you can match them all so they look the same, but if you try and mix these lights with something else that's 5600 Kelvin only, you might get some weird color casts and it might be kind of hard to work with. Overall, I think this makes one of the best fill lights because it's so cheap, and because it's not a single source LED, it's a lot bigger, so you're going to get a little softer light when using it as a fill light or a backlight. It's not quite big enough to use as a key light without a diffuser if you're going for a soft look, so keep that in mind. The other thing about this light that none of the other lights have is built-in barn doors, so you can flag the light and make sure it's not spilling where you don't want it to really easily. One other con about this is that because it has so many LEDs, if you use the barn doors, it kind of makes striped looking shadows instead of a nice soft fall off. Sticking the diffuser on helps a lot, but it also cuts a lot of the light, so it's kind of a trade-off. Next, we're going to talk about the Socani X60. The first thing to know about this light is that although it says X60 in the name, it's actually an 80 watt LED, so it is a little bit brighter than the 60 watt versions. This light also comes with a really nice carrying case, and I'm a sucker for nice cases, so that's really good. It's also the smallest light, so that makes it really easy to hide places and just makes it easier to carry around in general. The build quality of all these lights is good, but this one is all metal, so if you find yourself smashing your lights or dropping them often, that might be a consideration. The biggest benefit with this light is that it has built-in effects, so you can simulate lightning, flickering light bulbs, TV sets, or even fireworks. It also comes with some color-changing sleeves you can slide over the reflector of this light, so that makes it a little more versatile. There are a few drawbacks to this light. One is that it's probably the loudest light out of everything, including my 150 watt Godox light, so you probably don't want to use this for key lights for interviews. The other big downside for me for this light is that it doesn't use a standard power cord. So you're always going to have a power brick hanging off the back of your light, and the cord isn't even long enough for the brick to sit on the ground, so it might cause some issues down the road. Overall, this is probably one of the best budget, versatile lights because it has the built-in special effects, and it can be used for other types of things. Next, we're going to be talking about the Neewer SL-60W, and it's essentially the same light as the Godox version, and a lot of people call this the Aputure 120D killer, but it is definitely not that. The only reason that it's not an Aputure 120D killer is simply the brightness. It's nowhere near as bright, so although it's a nice light, it just can't be used in the same scenarios. My favorite thing about this light is that it's nearly silent. It does have a cooling fan, but it's so quiet you don't have to worry about that at all. The other thing is that it's very affordable. It is 60 watts, but it is on the cheaper end, so if you're on a tight budget, this might be the light for you. Like a lot of the other 60 watt lights, the biggest downfall of this is just the brightness. If you're using just an umbrella and have it pretty close, you can make it work well as a key light, especially if you have a lens that can shoot at f1.8, but it's not really bright enough to use with a really big diffuser or with a diffuser that has an internal baffle and a front diffusion as well. So I think this is a really good overall starter's light as long as you plan on only using an umbrella and shooting in a really controlled environment. It's also great because you can keep this light and use it as a backlight or a fill light perfectly if you plan on upgrading to a brighter light in the future. Next, I'll be talking about the Yongnuo YN360 Pro stick light. So the biggest difference with this light is that it has white LEDs as well as full RGB colors. The other thing is that it's really easy to use. It does come with an app that you can use to change the colors and the brightness, but I find the back panel to be the easiest thing, and it's not hard to learn. You can use multiple ones of these in a single group and control all of them from the back panel of just one light, which is awesome. It does have a built-in battery and that lasts pretty much all day, so unless you're going to be shooting at full power for more than 8 hours, you don't even really have to bring the chargers with you. If you are shooting longer, you can plug it in and just leave it plugged in too. So this light is really versatile because it's so long in one dimension. You could use it as a key light, but you could also use it for an accent light or a backlight, and it just works in a lot of different scenarios. Again, this light doesn't have a Bowens mount either, but obviously it's not really meant to be used like that, so that's not really a con, just something to keep in mind. Another thing to know is that the RGB color mode, the colors aren't super bright, so it's best used as an accent light or a background light like I'm using one right now. These are also somewhat expensive, around 129 bucks, so if you're looking for an all-around light that does a lot of things well, this is probably not the one to choose. So this is probably the best overall light for background lighting or accent lighting because it does have the full color range, and it's really easy. You can hold it or sit it on a tripod stand or a light stand and do a whole lot of different things with it. So one fun trick that I do if you don't have a turntable or a slider but you want some cool product shots is you can set up a static shot with your camera and your product, turn this light on and kind of wave it over your product, and the reflections of the light and the changing shadows make for a really dynamic product shot. Lastly, we're going to talk about the Godox SL150W, which is a 150 watt LED light, and that's what I'm using to record this video right now. So when it comes to an Aputure 120D killer, this is a good comparison. This light is very comparable because if it's not better, it's definitely brighter and it's a whole lot cheaper. It's less than half the price. So if you're on a budget but you want a nice bright light, this is the one to go with. So right now I'm using this with a double baffle diffusion and it's a 36-inch diffuser, and I'm able to shoot at ISO 100 at f2.8 and the light's only at 65%. The other great thing about this light is that it's pretty quiet. It's kind of right in the middle as far as quiet goes, but since it's so bright, I can shoot with it at a lower power setting, and the lower power setting you choose, the quieter it is. I had an SL150W and that light was a lot louder and you had to turn it up to 100% to use it in most cases. So it was a lot louder in use. That's also one of the cons, is that it's not completely silent or even on the quieter end of the spectrum, so it kind of depends what your setup is. Right now I have the microphone about 1.5 feet away and the softbox is only a few feet away, but you can't really hear it, so if you're doing a video like this, it's not going to make a difference. If for some reason you needed this light to be super close and the microphone a lot closer, then maybe you would hear it, but I really wouldn't worry about it. Another con is that this is the most expensive light, but that's also because it's obviously the brightest. So it's not really a con, you're just paying more and you're getting more for that money. So overall, I think this is the best overall light. It can be used in more situations where you can't limit the other light and the ambient light in the scene. And it's also good to be used for a key light, a background light, a hair light, anything that you need. So if I could buy just one light to start with and I wasn't on a super tight budget, this would be it. I also tested each one using nothing but an umbrella in a normal scenario for use as a key light, and I'm going to share the camera settings that I had to use for each light at full power. That way you can compare them in a real life scenario. So this is the Godox SL150W using nothing but an umbrella, and I'm shooting at 1/50th of a second, f2.8, and ISO 200. This is the Neewer SL-60W, and I'm shooting at 1/50th of a second at f2.8 at an ISO of 800. This is the Neewer 660 LED bicolor light, and I'm shooting this at 1/50th of a second f2.8 at ISO 800. This is the Socani X60 with a bare bulb and an umbrella, and I'm shooting at 1/50th of a second ISO 400 and f2.8. This is the Yongnuo YN362 Pro, and I'm shooting at 1/50th of a second f2.8 and ISO 1600, and I'm using nothing but the light stick on an umbrella adapter with a white umbrella. I'll leave links to all of these lights in the description, and they are affiliate links, but it doesn't cost you anything extra. But if you choose to get any of these, it does help me create more reviews like this. That's it for now, guys. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up so more people can see it, and make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss our next reviews. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.